Okay, we are ready. Bhumika, would you like to begin or should I? Bhumika, you're not audible.
Bhumika, you are not audible.
Achha. Okay, I'll begin the session until then. Welcome everybody to our first panel session titled Exclusive Inclusivity, Who Gets to Be the Folk in Folklore? We have three panelists with us and a chair. I would like to take this time to first introduce the chair, and then we will introduce the panelists one by one. Okay, so to chair the session, we have Dr. C. Justin Selvaraj, who is currently working as an assistant professor and heading the Department of Fine Arts and Aesthetics at the Madurai Kamaraj University in Madurai. He received his doctoral degree from the University of Hyderabad, and his research interests are folk culture studies, kinship studies, ethnography, community development studies, and folk art and aesthetics. He's being invited for lectures at state, national, international conferences, workshops, and seminars. He has published more than 20 research papers in peer-reviewed and UGC care listed journals at national and international level. As his dynamic participation in academic events at state and national universities, he plays a key role in most of the academic and professional bodies, namely Folklore Society of South Indian Languages, Indian Folklore Researchers Organization, Indian History Congress, Dravidian Linguistics Association, Ethnographic and Folk Culture Society, Indian Sociological Society, Research Committee 2, Studies on Family, Marriage and Kinship in Indian Sociological Society. He's a member of the London Folklore Society and the International Society for Folk Narrative Research. As an academician, he has conducted various research programs with state and national level agencies as an additional dimension of research. He is currently holding research projects estimated to cost more than 30 lakhs. Apart from that, he extends his services through academic responsibilities such as subject expert in Board of Studies, academic council of the Academic Council of various universities and institutions, consultancy services for qualitative analysis for assessment and academic writing, among many others. We are delighted to have you here with us, sir. Now I hand over the mic to Bhumika so that she can introduce our panelists.
Yeah. Am I audible to everyone? I just want to make sure of that. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. And we have a really young panel this time. It's like the young folklorist panel here. I would start by introducing our first panelist, Sangeeta Jawla. She is a research scholar at Ambedkar University, Delhi, a practicing potter recognized by the Ministry of Textiles and a storyteller. Her academic pursuits are deeply intertwined with her artistic and narrative endeavors, focusing on collecting the folklore of the pottery community across India. At the core of her scholarly exploration in her PhD research titled Potter's Narratives, Identity, Social Relations, and Material Culture, her credentials include certifications in folklore and cultural studies, along with um, programming arts, Hindustani music. Additionally, she has elaborately studied and holds a deep interest in the Sanskrit language. Complementing her scholarly achievements, Sangeeta boasts 3 years of training in classical vocal music at Gandharva Mahavidyalaya. Her expertise extends beyond academia as she actively engages as a resource person for events organized by institutions like FICA, CCK, which is under Ambedkar University, Delhi, Kochi Biennial Foundation, and Sunadam Trust, Bangalore. Sangeeta has showcased her storytelling prowess at esteemed institutions such as Ambedkar University, Delhi, and Vithar Academy, Bangalore. In the realm of research, Sangeeta serves as a research fellow with Reframe and holds a research guarantee position at Sangeet Natak Academy. This dual identity, as both as a researcher and a hands-on creator, exemplifies her holistic approach to understanding and preserving the rich heritage of Indian pottery. We welcome you, Sangeeta. Next, we have our second panelist, Dr. Hemchandra. He is an assistant professor at Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. He completed his PhD from Ambedkar University, Delhi in 2023. For his PhD, he worked on the interface of religion and folk epic tradition of Meitei community of Manipur. Prior to that, he completed his MPhil in English from the University of Delhi in 2016. He worked on the politics of representation with regard to scripts in Manipur for his MPhil. His area of interest lies in folklore studies, religious studies, and gender studies. We welcome you, Hemchandra. Thank you for being here. Last but definitely not the least, we have Garima Plawat. She is a PhD candidate at Indiana University, Bloomington's Folklore and Ethnomusicology Department. She works at the intersection of folklore, ethnography, and religious studies. Her professional background uh, is in content writing, editorial community outreach for Indian indigenous communities, focusing on the Kabi community, and education. She has been a member of the Center for Kabi Studies in India, working closely with them in the archival, documentation, and preservation of folklore and customs of the community. She has also been working on several literary projects with people of the Kabi community to bring the disappearing traditions of indigenous communities to spotlight. Uh, in addition, she has helped in editing books for the Kabi community and definitely made a lot of contributions for the community itself. The I will sum it up quickly. Um, yeah, she has also written her chapter on the monologue published in the book War Anthology, Side Effects of Living. Her, yeah, all right. Thank you so much for being here, Garima. And I'm pretty sure it's a different time zone over there for you. Um, can you tell us what time it is there right now?
It's 7:30 a.m. right now.
Good morning, then.
Good morning. And good evening to you.
Thank you. So I would first give you a clarity of how we will go about this panel session. First, each of the panelists will get to share their ideas on the topic that this panel session is based on. Exclusive inclusivity, who gets to be the folk in folklore. So each of them is going to talk about certain things, and it is going to be tied through a discussion after they are done, and then the our chair can also take over and bring on the discussion. Um, and then later on we can have the Q&A session from you guys. So I would like Sangeeta to start with her insights. Thank you so much.
To make sure am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
you're audible.
Okay. I'll just present my screen and please tell me if it's visible. Is it visible? The screen?
Yeah.
It's visible.
Yeah. And the PPT?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay. So I'll just quickly start. As introduced by Bhumika and Meghal, this is Sangeeta Jawla. I'm a PhD English literature scholar, but my research has been in folklore from past 7-8 years now. And I am also a potter artisan from authorized from Ministry of Textiles, and I use pottery as my medium of storytelling as well. In today's discussion, exclusive inclusivity, who gets to be the folk in folklore, I would like to take on the ideas of literacy and performance in the context of Indian potters, because these are the hidden storytellers, and I try in my research and as a potter artisan and storyteller to bring out those stories, because potters are not really performers. They don't really share these stories outside of their homes and generations. And I, belonging to the same family of potters from Haryana, I try to take up that work of research as well as a potter to go forward with the kind of narratives and the folklore that these people hold on to themselves and remember and also cherish the same lore in their material culture as well. So I'll just start with the stories of hidden storytellers. I'll give a small introduction to my paper first. Folklore, as a rich tapestry of cultural narratives and traditions, often evoke images of ancient tales passed down through generations by ordinary people. However, within the realm of folklore studies, the question arises, who gets to be the folk in folklore? This presentation delves into the complexity of this question by focusing on the stories of hidden storytellers, particularly within the context of Indian potters and their folklore, collected from urban and rural potters of Himachal, Haryana, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Assam, Tripura, Madurai, and Bangalore. In the context of the title, Who is the Folk in Folklore? It is essential to understand the nuanced nature of folklore and the diverse communities that contribute to the richness. Mr. Bhimaya discussed in the morning on the idea of who is the folk. With this panel, we try to take up the discussion on our individual context of study, me, Hemchandra, and Garima. However, within the realm of folklore studies, the designation of who qualifies as the folk raises intricate questions. Traditionally, the term folk refers to ordinary individuals within a society who create, preserve, and transmit folklore. These individuals are often seen emerging from rural or indigenous communities, embodying the collective wisdom and creativity of their people. Yet, as folklore scholarship has evolved, it has become evident that the concept of folk extends beyond mere demographies. The questions of who constitutes the folk in folklore is not solely based on social or economic status, but also encompasses factors like cultural identity, participation in oral traditions, and engagement with community practices. This presentation delves into the complexity of the question by focusing on the stories of hidden storytellers, particularly within the context of Indian potters. Indian potters represent a marginalized community whose contribution to folklore may not always be recognized or acknowledged. Despite their socio-economic challenges and limited literacy, Indian potters possess a rich oral tradition utilizing performance and material culture as medium for storytelling. By putting a spotlight on these hidden storytellers, we can unravel the layers of complexity surrounding the notion of folk in folklore. It prompts us to re-evaluate our understanding of folklore and recognize the diverse voices and experiences that contribute to its tapestry. Through this exploration, we gain a deeper appreciation for the multiplicity of identities and narratives within folklore, fostering a more inclusive approach to its study and preservation. Stories of hidden storytellers. Importance of literacy and performance in the context of Indian potters. Indian potters are often marginalized among other Indian caste communities, although they possess a rich tradition in order to show resistance and resilience towards the hierarchy. Hence, the question arises, are the potters considered the folk based on their social relations and material culture? Despite limited literacy among the rural potters group, their folk narratives, songs, quips, and idioms, and also material culture serves as a medium for not just storytelling, but also some very deep philosophical questions. In order to extend my discussion, I would like to discuss some general points around the folk itself by exploring some different elements. The first one, locating women in the folk, the gender dynamics in the context of potter community. Examination of the roles and contribution of women within folklore tradition, particularly in the context of pottery. Women of pottery households are not allowed to touch the pottery wheel across many Indian traditions, about which a narrative is very famous among the potters. The potters say that the very first shape that is created on the wheel looks like this. It looks like a Shivlinga, and the wheel itself is considered to be the yoni, the vagina. And that's why women are not really allowed to touch, although it explains the very creation of something with linga and yoni. And once the potter cuts it with the thread, it's the umbilical cord that the potters cut. Even though there are so many gender symbolisms there, still women are not really allowed to touch it. Similarly, when it comes to the playing of pot percussion, women are not really allowed in some folk traditions such as Ragani folk lore of Haryana, folk singing of Haryana. And the other aspect I want to take from the caste stories of potters, the potters say that hum Brahma ke sar par baithe hain. We are sitting on the head of Brahma. I'm taking the context of vulnerable, the title vulnerable, from Prani Liampathong in the context of folklore. And as she discusses that the concept of vulnerable refers to those individual or communities who are socially, economically, or culturally marginalized within a given community. These groups often face various forms of discrimination, oppression, and exclusion, which shape their narratives, traditions, and lived experiences. The same can be seen in the context of potters, as one of the potters from Alwar, Rajasthan, claims that the potter community has emerged from the head of God Brahma. This is the analogy from the head, the Brahmins are emerging, and the potters in many in many geographies, they are considered as Shudras. So the laborers. And the potters, by saying that hum Brahma ke sar par baithe hain, we are sitting on the head of Brahma, they are saying that they are at par with Brahmins. According to some interpretation, this association reflects the hierarchical structure of Varna system where artisans and craftsmen, including potters, were placed on in the Shudra Varna, considered the lowest in the social hierarchy. The concept is rooted in ancient Hindu texts such as Purush Sukta hymn from Rig Veda, which describes the creation of the universe and origin of four Varnas from different parts of cosmic being, Purusha, that is Brahma. The other point is folklore inclusive or exclusive in the context of folk? I would like to take the example of pottery teaching in the context of rural settings and in the context of urban settings. In analyzing the inclusivity or exclusivity within folklore communities, let's consider the example of pottery artisan compared to the pottery scholars in context of pottery teaching. While pottery artisans from rural communities often face financial struggles and are not adequately compensated for their craft, scholars and learners engaged in studio pottery in urban settings are often given preferential treatment in teaching roles. Traditional pottery artisans possess deep knowledge of the values and traditions of pottery, rooted in their cultural heritage. However, they may not fit for the conventional mold of teachers. They emphasize learning through observation, suggesting that one glean valuable skill and insight by immersing themselves in the pottery making process within the artisan's household. So they are basically saying that you need to stay at our house and learn pottery by observing. And that's how they came up with the term कि pottery तो हमारे खून में है, pottery is in our blood. On the contrary, when we look at the studio potters in the urban settings, they lack the awareness of the very nuances of Indian pottery traditions, but excel in pedagogical techniques. Consequently, they are often favored as teachers due to their ability to effectively convey pottery techniques and methodologies. This preference highlights a disparity in recognition and validation between traditional knowledge holders and those who may lack cultural heritage but possess teaching skills. The other part, the other question, is folk an insider or an outsider? Who understands folklore? A potter from folk community or a scholar in academia? This concept is included here to understand the dynamic between those within folk community and those outside of it. I would like to share that I belong to a potter generation from Haryana, and I tried to play my part from being from that community and archive the folklore of the community. As a member of the potter community with a traditional background, I may navigate the insider-outsider dynamic differently when conducting research on pottery community. Despite not living in the rural traditional setting myself, my familial ties provide me with intimate knowledge and cultural understanding of pottery practices. However, the question arises, does my literary and academic training make me better suited researcher than rural potters who have inherited wisdom of pottery through generations? I would like to include one very important point that Dr. Pravina Shukla in the morning, she mentioned that one should study the communities from inside out rather than the colonial aspect of outside in. This point delves into the complexity of insider-outsider dynamics of folklore research. While my academic background may equip me with the research methodologies and analytical skills, rural potters possess invaluable experiential knowledge passed down through generations. Thus, the efficacy of research may depend on striking a balance between the academic expertise and indigenous wisdom and recognizing the unique insights each perspective offers. My next question, and we are not really trying to answer questions here. We are putting up these thoughts so that we can discuss it later and we can ponder upon them when we are doing our research as young researchers. Is folk rural or urban? I'm taking the context of some of the potters from Haryana and Rajasthan. They have migrated to urban settings like Kumar colony of Delhi, which is situated in Uttamnagar, Delhi, the west part of Delhi. In this exploration of how rural and urban setting influence folklore tradition, the example of Uttamnagar, Delhi, Kumar colony potters is taken. The migration often entails a significant shift in environment, lifestyle, and social dynamics, which inevitably influence the way pottery traditions are practiced and narratives are shaped. In Uttamnagar, Delhi, the potters face the challenges of navigating within larger caste setting where their traditional practices may be overshadowed or marginalized. However, amidst these challenges, the potters are actively resisting and reclaiming their identity by recalling and celebrating their traditional folklore. Through storytelling, songs, and rituals, they assert their cultural heritage and reform their place within the broader urban landscape. This example illustrates the dynamic interplay between rural and urban contexts in shaping folklore traditions. It also underscores the resilience of potter community in adapting to new environments while holding on to their cultural roots, thus highlighting the enduring power of folklore in preserving identity and heritage among societal transformation. This is the last session that I'll be talking about, the hidden folk in performance. In this context, I would like to share that along with being a researcher, I also adopt the persona of a storyteller, theatrical storytelling performer who aims to bring these hidden tales of pottery community to light through performance and a venue previously unexplored by potters themselves. As a scholar, I embark on a journey to uncover the rich tapestry of folklore embedded within pottery tradition across rural India. These tales passed down through generation within potter community often remain hidden from broader public. Drawing upon my shared generational occupation with the potters, I delve into oral traditions, labor tales, folk songs sung by women during marriage rituals, the intricacies of gender taboos associated with pottery practices, and the usage of clay pots in music traditions. Transitioning into the role of a theatrical performer, I transform these discovered folk narratives into performances, engaging audiences across diverse settings. Through storytelling, music, and dramatic interpretation, I aim to give life into these tales, ensuring that their preservation and transmission beyond the confines of pottery community. Furthermore, I explored the intersectionality of Urdu and Hindi poetry within pottery by showcasing the cultural richness and linguistic diversity embedded in this craft. I'll take the opportunity to share this Urdu Shairi, Urdu poem by Allama Iqbal, which tells the very important relationship between the clay and the wheel of the potter. And the Shairi goes like this. हूँ नर्म मिट्टी तो मुझे रौंद कर निकल जाओ, हूँ नर्म मिट्टी तो मुझे रौंद कर निकल जाओ, कि मेरे नास तो बस कोजागर उठाता है. Which means that I am soft clay, mold me gently, for only the potter lifts my pride. My other practice, along with storytelling, is the engraving on the clay pots. And this way, the project not only honored the heritage of the potter community, but also foster a deep appreciation for the contribution of India's cultural landscape. Thus, performance emerges as a powerful medium for revitalizing and disseminating folklore, bridging the gap between hidden storytellers and broader audiences. These are some of the pots, the pictures of the pots that I'm sharing. This one includes the ghatams from South India and a male ghatam player, because from only past few years back that women potters, women ghatam percussionists have emerged. This story is coming from Maharashtra, where the potter is using his tapping tool to tell if the human body is baked or not by tapping on the head of the Saint Namdev. This is a singer, a potter singer woman from Haryana who works as a cleaning lady in a school. And this is the kind of exhibition that I do with my pots, with all the stories written with every pot. And alongside, there is always a storytelling performance going on. In conclusion, I would conclude it in very small 3 points. The notion of folk in folklore is multifaceted, encompassing various identities, dynamics, and perspectives. By unveiling the stories of hidden storytellers, such as Indian potters, we gain deeper understanding of the richness and diversity of folklore traditions. It is imperative to acknowledge and amplify the voices of marginalized communities within folk studies, ensuring a more inclusive and comprehensive exploration of cultural heritage. I would like my friend Hemchandra to now continue with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Sangeeta. So I'll share my screen first. So is it visible, my screen, my slides?
Yeah.
It's visible.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. First and foremost, thank you for this opportunity and a wonderful presentation, Sangeeta. And yeah, speaking of the larger theme of this panel, inclusivity, who gets to be the folk in folklore. I'll try to look at that's a question that I will try to problematize towards the end of my presentation. But for now, this is the presentation topic: the politics of representation, a case study of the Meitei community of Manipur. For this, I will specifically be looking at this folk epic tradition of Manipur called the Khamba Thoidi, and this is how one can see it mirroring the contemporary landscape of the state of the community. And before we delve into this epic, it is kind of prerequisite for us to have a deeper understanding of a brief history about the state, about the community in terms of its religion. So this was the arrival of Vaishnavism in Manipur. This was the early 17th century. There already was this indigenous religion called the Sanamahi religion. And with the coming of Vaishnavism, it completely swiped off the indigeneity completely. And of course, there are a lot of resistance, a lot of revivalist trends that could be seen in the later part of the 20th century and early 21st century. But the larger picture remains the same. Speaking of the whole idea of conversion model, with the coming of Vaishnavism, how one can see a very systematic cleansing and doing away of the indigeneity. This is an excerpt by this noted author, Padma Shri Rajkumar Jhaljit Singh, from his book, A Short History of Manipur. I'll read out this quote. The first reference to Manipur is in Adi Parva on the occasion of Arjun going from Hiranyavendu to see the eastern region. After seeing the Mahendra Mountains, he proceeded slowly along the coast, reached Manipur and married Chitrangada, the princess of that kingdom. The second reference is in Aswamedha Parva in connection with the roaming of sacrificial horse guarded by Arjun and the eventual fight between him and his son Babruvahana, the king of Manipur. As we can see, this is precisely the point where the conversion model, we can see the success of it, whereby the newly converted Meitei, the Sanamahi following community of Manipur, we can see that they are made to feel part of the larger narrative of Hinduism, the larger narrative of Vaishnavism over here. And this is basically where the narrative of the text of Mahabharata has the interpolation of where the northeastern part, where the Meitei community of Manipur can be seen as very much part of the narrative. And speaking of the text, coming to the text, we see that in the Sanamahi pantheon, we have these two this god and goddess, Nungpuk Ningthau, on whose idea, on who Khamba is a representation of Nungpuk Ningthau. And on the other side, we have Thoibi. She is the protagonist, the female protagonist of this folk epic tradition. She's modeled around the goddess Panthoibi, again in the same Sanamahi pantheon. With the coming of Vaishnavism in the state, we can see that the representation of Khamba has been slowly and very conveniently modeled around Shiva, and Thoibi to that of goddess Durga. So this is where we can see the transition happening. And this is the textual, this is a written text of the folk epic tradition of Khamba Thoibi. This is by the noted author who's known as the Mahakavi of Manipur, Anganghal. I would, to the paucity of time, I would not be reading the first one. The second excerpt is where we can see a direct comparison between Khamba and Thoibi with Shiva and Durga. So we can see the second slide, the second excerpt. She on his left, Khamba and Thoibi. The two took their stance in the Thangjing square in front of Moirang public, shown the two today before Moirang God shrine, similar to Shiva, Durga appearing on top of Kailash mountain. This is precisely the point where we can see the culmination of this conversion model very strongly. And to add to this, there's a festival called Baruni Chinkaba, which essentially is about celebrating and worshipping the Nungpok Ningthau, which I mentioned about over here, Nungpok Ningthau and Panthoibi. But the modern day, the contemporary idea, association of this festival is with this man dressed as Shiva, his body painted as Shiva. And the entire paraphernalia of this festival revolves around celebrating, worshipping this man, Shiva, the god over here. And this is ideally in the Sanamahi pantheon. This was supposed to be Shiva, this is supposed to be Nungpok Ningthau and Panthoibi, who was supposed to be worshipped. But over here, we can see on the right side of the screen, this is the idol of goddess Durga. And on the other side, we can see Shiva over here. So this has been the systematic cleansing as far as the idea of representation is concerned. This is where one is made to feel part of that they are part of this larger narrative, as I mentioned earlier. Now, another interesting observation, another interesting development is that the Meitei community, which I was talking about, this has the clan system, which is known by the name Yek Salai Taret, each having their own colors, representing the community, representing the clans. With the conversion model, we can see, to make them feel part, to make them feel represented, we can see the systematic, again, conversion into the Gotra system, to have this more nuanced Hindu identity, more nuanced Vaishnav identity. So we can see, for example, Ningthauja, a very typical Sanamahi name. This has been changed into the Gotra system, Shandilya, Kashyap, Madhugalya, Kaushika, Gautam, Atriya, Bharadwaj, so on and so forth. This is what I mean when I talk about the conversion model. So this is where they are made to feel part of it. This is where they feel that representation is made. And this is one part of representation. The flip side of this representation, the politics behind this representation is that speaking specifically of the Khambathwebi epic, we can see this epic is basically a celebration of the people from the hills representing the tribal community and the people from the valley representing the Meitei community. The epic is basically the intermingling of these two communities, but with the newly acquired Vaishnav identity, we can see that any kind of non-Hindu identity or non-Hindu elements would be completely done away with. For example, speaking about this character called Kabui Salang Maiba, he's a man of a tribal descent, and we can see that when the protagonist Khamba and his sister Kamnu, when they were completely disowned by their own Meitei brethren, this was when Kabui Salang Maiba, despite belonging from a different community altogether, he takes charge and he gives shelter to the brother and sister. And not only that, in other instances of the story, of the narrative, we can see that in the most crucial of junctures, it was this man of tribal descent, Kabui Salang Maiba. He comes and he rescues Khamba in whatever situation, problem that he faces throughout the narrative. So his is a very integral, his is a very significant contribution without which the narrative would falter easily. Having said that, in the contemporary retelling of this epic, specifically with regard to the Mahakavi, which I was mentioning about, Ananghal, his English translation over here, this is where the role of Kabui Salang Maiba is that of a very passive one. We can see that in the so-called authentic version, or the oral tradition at least, we can see that he takes a very active role in terms of saving Khamba from any kind of problems whatsoever. But over here, he receives a premonition. His wife receives a premonition about Khamba being in danger, but he does not act on it. The last couple of lines from this excerpt, the third last line, she relayed her dream to her husband of the premonition. The couple was in low spirits. Then the news of Khamba reached them in due course, as a flame appeared in the smoke. This is the inaction of Kabui Salang Maiba, who otherwise in the oral retelling of this epic, we can see that he springs forth and takes immediate action. A very active stance can be seen as far as Kabui Salang Maiba is concerned. But over here, again, systematic negation of any kind of contribution, because this is purely non-Hindu as far as the newly acquired identity is concerned. And in continuation of that, the Khambathwebi is also very much part of, there's this element of this festival called Laihirauba, which is very much part of the Khambathwebi narrative. And the Laihirauba festival, as we can see in this picture, this is a contemporary picture of this festival, where essentially, ideally, the festival is about celebration, the intermingling of the hills and the valley. But with the current turmoil between the two communities in question, we can see that there's non-participation of the tribal communities or the people from the hill. But the festival, for its successful culmination, needs participation from both communities, which is why we can see on the left side of the screen the two girls in the green dress. These are the dress representing the tribal community, and on the right side we can see these two people dressed as, these two kids dressed as Meitei gods. So we can see, but the interesting part or the sad part over here is that this is not a tribal, or this is not someone from the hills donning this tribal attire. This is basically the Meitei, because for the successful culmination, as I said, they need participation from the tribal community. So because there's no real participation, so to speak, which can be seen, this is where the Meiteis, they come and they dress themselves as fellow tribals, and that's how the festival gets celebrated. This is there, and another instance can be seen over here. Having said that, this is one representation of the Khambathwebi, one-sided narrative of the Khambathwebi tradition, whereby the tribal elements are completely done away with. But this is the Meitei's version. This is the Meitei community's side of the story. This is their representation. But interestingly enough, we also have documented accounts of the people of of the hills, how they vision, how they see the epic of Khambathuibi. For them, as you can see over here, this is a picture by Paujailung Thaimai. He has painted this picture whereby whereby we can see a celebration of that intermingling, which unfortunately is missing as far as the Meitei narrative of the epic is concerned. But over here, the hills narrative of the epic is where we can see this man in the middle. He's dressed in the Meitei attire, and on the other side we can see the woman. She is a Meitei, and the man is what later on comes to be known as Kabui Selang Maiba. So there's this inter-caste, interfaith marriage happening, and then it's celebrated, certainly. And this is what I mean when I mention about the intermingling, the so-called osmosis between these two communities. This is the version of the hills as far as the Khambathuibi epic is concerned. Similarly, the instance which I was talking about of Kabui Selang Maiba, when the fellow Meitei brethren, they had abandoned Khamba and his sister, it was this man from the hills, this outsider. He comes and he rescues the brother and sister, and so this is the representation that you can see over here. Rangampo, this is Kabui Selang Maiba. He adopts the brother and sister Khamba and Thuibi, and sorry, Khamba and Khamnu, and we can see this scene over here. And I think, yeah, I'll quickly wrap up. There are lots to be said, lots to be discussed, but I'll quickly wrap up my presentation again because due to paucity of time. In conclusion, I would like to make one point basically, is that speaking of the Khambathuibi epic tradition, Khambathuibi narrative, the takeaway of my presentation is that whose text finally is this? Is the text of Khambathuibi, the narrative of Khambathuibi, is it? Is it the Meitei's text or is it the tribal's text? Because we can see the idea of inclusivity, which the panel is all about. We can see that this is something that is seen to be fading, because essentially the Meiteis cannot be claiming this narrative as theirs entirely, because there's a lot of participation, lots of intervention as far as the tribal community is concerned. And similarly, we see the pictures are proven of the existing scholarship as far as the narrative of Khambathuibi from the perspective, from the point of view of the hills, of the tribals are concerned. So the question with which I would like to leave my presentation, I'll end my presentation, is who exactly is the one who is the owner of a folklore, so to speak. So with this, I end my presentation. Thank you. I'll hand over to Garima.
Thank you, Hem. That was a really, really good presentation. And I think that sort of is going to, bridge my own presentation. I'm going to share my slides first. Give me a second. Okay, I guess I am visible as well as audible, I guess. Okay. So good morning from this side of the world, and I'm really thankful and grateful that I got to be part of this panel, considering this panel is going to be, discussing and has discussed something really relevant today for today's, contemporary scholarship. So basically, my entire, talk would be sort of very roughly divided into two parts. First would be the positionality of me as a scholar, as a researcher who is working with an indigenous community, Karbi, from Northeast India. And the second part of that would be considering the ethics of me being an outsider working with another community that I'm not part of. So basically in 2020, I went to Assam to, be part of this conference that was in collaboration with University of Tartu and Autonomous Council of Karbi Anglong. And this is where I met the Karbi community for the first time. And these are the Karbi women in the traditional clothes.
These are the Karbi men in their traditional clothes. And basically, Karbi community is one of the major ethnic minorities in Northeast India, and they're mainly, they reside in Assam. And later on, the community invited me to collaborate with them, to sort of work with them in scholarly works, but also to document within the cultural traditional aspect of their work. And in 2021, I finally, was able to go to Assam, and I did an extensive 10-month-long field work to get acquainted with the community, to understand the kind of rituals they had, and also with the help of the, Karbi scholars, I also documented their rituals and festivals. So this is the Chumankan, which is their, mortuary festival, which I documented in the village Hapchan. This is one of their, family festival, which is called Chojun, which is to propitiate their ancestors. And this is a Karbi youth festival, one of the major, youth festivals in Northeast India. So this was to basically understand the kind of, folklore that resides within the community, the kind of work that they're doing. And in that course, I was also interviewing the ritualists, the scholars, and this helped me get a really nuanced understanding of how the societal structure of Karbi functioned. And after that, applied for PhD, and my main work was with their community's mortuary festival called Chumankan again. And this was only done when I was deeply and closely acquainted with the Karbi scholars, and we had both of this, kind of dialogue going on where we both trusted each other to, allow me to present and represent work that is outside India as well. So what happened was that the reason why I'm rambling so much about my background is to basically give you this understanding of my identity, of my positionality, of this non-Karbi person, non-indigenous person who comes from, North India, and I'm a Hindu as well, to work alongside an indigenous community from Northeast India. And it becomes really pertinent to understand the kind of, my position will be working within this community, considering we know the kind of friction that Northeast India has had for like decades, the kind of political upheavals they have gone through. And so my presence in itself is a political statement. And so I remember that when I was there doing my field work, one of my really close mentors, Singh sir, he's a Karbi folklorist, and he has been working tremendously for decades, documenting, researching the folklore, preserving them, archiving them. And so we, decided to sort of let him apply for this really great fellowship, whose name I will not say, which is, mainly meant for the indigenous people within India. And I was really confident that he would get this fellowship, considering he has such an impressive background, being a scholar, being a folklorist, and a resume which spans for 9 pages showing his publications. Indeed, very impressive. But he did not receive that fellowship, which was really, really surprising for me. But for him, it was not something shocking of a thing. He was disappointed, yes, but not really shocked. And I remember he said something along the lines of like, we are not the idle kind of indigenous people for the government. We are the Northeastern people. And this is where I realized the kind of definitions, the kind of representations that exist within not just academia, but within the mindset of the people as to who gets to be the indigenous person or the community, who gets to be the idle kind of exotic kind of indigenous community who can be given resources. And there is this really big hierarchy, not just within Western academia, but within our own country as well. And this is where a kind of marginalization of representation comes in, where non-indigenous people get to decide who is indigenous and how much indigeneity they can carry within themselves. And I remember that as I was, doing research and doing documentation, I was also asked to read a lot of literature that was written by non-Karbi people, specifically from North India and Hindu Assamese scholars. And I remember one of these scholars very confidently wrote that Karbi community is the Columbus of Northeast India, which is really ironic, considering Columbus was the figure who was responsible for ethnic cleansing of so many Native Americans. And yet here was this non-Karbi, non-indigenous person creating these parallels with indigenous community with Columbus. Of course, there was a strong opposition from the community itself, like there was an uproar that why are we being, compared to such a figure? But by the time there was this opposition, the damage was already done, because the community came to know about this like way later on. And what happens with this example is that the damage that is done, that when non-Indigenous people, non-Indigenous scholars, when they work around these Indigenous community without the information, without their consent, a kind of an image is created of that community, and then it's circulated within mainstream academia, which is then exported to global academia. And what happens during these spaces is that the community on whose work these researchers were created, they're not even aware that their image has been already created for them without even their information. And this sort of circulates within the global scenario, and let alone combating, the community cannot even be aware because they don't have the resources, because they are already on so much periphery that they don't have the means to even create this dialogue between the researchers and between themselves. And this is where I'll bring in the concept of ethics within Western academia versus Indian academia. So I'll be doing my fieldwork for my PhD soon, and I was asked to fill this IRB training and form, which is basically, and I will just read it out from their own website. IRB is basically institutional review board in the US, which is required for a project to review if it includes both research and human subjects. And an IRB protocol is a group of documents that conveys all the necessary information about your research with human subjects to IRB reviewers. And in addition to that, I was also made to go through this training to take courses on ethics and how to work, how to carry yourself, very ethically when you're working with Indigenous and marginalized communities. And the reason, again, why I'm rambling so much about this background, about the training, about ethics within the US, is to create this comparison between the ethics community that India has and the ethics community that West has, which is not to say that the US does not have a few skeletons in their closet. They definitely have a very dark history, considering the kind of, enslavement, the kind of, genocide that they have done. But at least that country, or the Western countries, have created a space where the Indigenous communities, the marginalized people, can fall back to, because the regulations that exist for research, especially for ethnography, especially for human subjects, are so strong, are so mandatory, that if you fail to meet those requirements, you will be like jailed, you will be fined, because it's considered a federal offense. Now, because I'm also supposed to get in touch with the ethics committee in India for my fieldwork, I did a bit of research, background research for what exists as a comparison in India. So we definitely have an ethics committee that works around, these ethnographic work, these social science research work. But the regulations that exist within our ethics committees are more like a suggestion, as opposed to being a mandatory kind of a rule or a law. And this is where a kind of, another kind of marginalization comes in, because the marginalized communities that are already on the periphery, now they can be exploited without any consequence, because they have no way to fall back to any kind of grievances, to get any kind of compensation, which ties back to me telling that what kind of representation happens by whom and how it is circulated. So basically, the kind of representation that has been happening for a while for the Indigenous community is not by them. And I think my entire talk was really to discuss that there needs to be this equal footing between the marginalized community and their scholars, as well as the researchers who are outsiders, to work with each other, to collaborate on an equal footing, so that these kind of exploitations, which are so much in number, they're sort of pulled back, and there is a more negotiable space to have a dialogue properly. So that is for my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Garima and Hale and Sangeeta, for such enriching, and like you've covered a lot of area altogether under the umbrella of exclusive inclusivity. I would invite Dr. Selvaraj sir to take forward the discussion.
Yes. Good evening to all, and good morning to Garima. Yes, here we had a pre-presentation. One is from the north, another who are technically from the Northeast. The three are I found as unique in nature, its presentations, because the first presentation done by Sangeeta Jawla, actually kind of self-realization, from the potter, performer, then she becomes a research scholar, and there are so many things to be dealt in, the what she was explaining. Like I found that there must be a new shift, should be happen in methodology of the folklore, like a defining folk also. Like that is what the folk exclusive inclusivity, because folklore itself, in inclusive nature, it has the inclusive nature, because the 22nd definition by Alan is, everybody must be aware of that. Two or more persons, right, having common factor, like it's a kind of a group. Any two or more person can be a group. So that in that aspects, like I found, that insider and or an outsider aspects of defining that folk. It was really good, and if any, the like. May I continue with all the remarks, or we will go with some question?
Yeah, we can take up questions alongside since we are running short on time. We have
Anybody else there to ask questions to the three panels?
You can raise your hand and we will ask you to ask the questions. Are there any questions?
If question is there, we will continue that question, and I will conclude with all my, the three presentations with my remarks.
I would start with a question from my side since nobody is asking for now. And this question goes on to all of you. Since this is a young folklorist research conference, and at some point you guys were very new to the field itself, and there must have been certain guidelines and certain things that you were still learning, which you weren't aware about, and you later on learned. What would be those like few tips or advices that you'd give to anybody entering the area, entering the field, making sure that he or she takes care of each aspect that you guys have covered collectively, and also the challenging aspects which nobody really talks about or addresses, that so the aspects that nobody really talks about or addresses. At the same time, like how should they go about it, and how disheartening it can be, and how to still keep your like keep yourself standing in the field, because it is not a like a very easy walk to get into the field, and you don't always get the right resources. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. So yeah, each of you can go, like with whoever wants to go first. I would like to, yeah, Garima.
I think since I'm just very fresh with my own, presentation, I'll just give a very quick overview, considering that I also did my, master's and bachelor's in India, and then I had to transition to another kind of, academia in the US. The first thing that I realized is that there needs to be a really supporting, network, because research is sometimes a very lonely kind of space. You get to do a lot, and you need to really, go through this journey. And I realized that the first step towards any kind of research, specifically when it comes to PhD, is to be really, really, trustworthy with what you are doing, because there will be moments where you'll be like, this is too difficult. This is the moment where you'll fall back to your own research. But that is more of a personal side. I think in terms of research, there is this tendency within academia that we really lean towards the scholarly part, the academic part, the bookish part, and we sort of take it for its granted. We think that is the God's word, and we forget that when you're working within the area of folklore or anthropology or cultural studies, it's the folk that comes first. And if you are not in dialogue with that folk, you are not really doing justice to the kind of work you're doing. So it's, again, this is more of a personal standing and not something as a sort of something universal. But I have always felt it more useful when I am with the community, working with them, talking with them, collaborating with them, because you're not working on a community, you're working with a community. And this is where you begin to understand, oh, okay, so this is where I was lacking, this is where I was having my biases. And your biases, your prejudices can only be negated when you, as I said, are in dialogue with the folk. As soon as you don't do that, you have already created your own subjective understanding of the community, the folk. And this is where the danger of misrepresenting comes in, or creating a research that is going to be as much of a pitfall for you as it is for the community or the folk. I think this is one point that immediately come into my mind. I will be more than glad to hear the other two talking about this.
So I can take example of the insider and outsider perspective. I started my journey with my own village in Haryana because I knew the language, the dialect, and I had some very basic questions about just the narratives. The first question I asked, are there any folk tales? Are there any folk songs? It took time for them to understand the question first, then answer them slowly. In like 2 or 3 days, I had to stay there for 2-3 days. That's when I went outside of Haryana, when I had at least a small perspective of what kind of narratives there are, such as the gender taboo that I was not aware of. And when I went outside, such as in Rajasthan, in Madhya Pradesh, I had few more questions. The last trip that I made was in August to Madurai and Bangalore, Mana Madurai and Bangalore. I met these Ghatam players, and I also met some rural potters in Bangalore. So I had many more questions. So this actually developed over time. The questions also developed, and with all these questions, many narratives came up, and many more ideas that are, and alongside there is a theory that is being read alongside, which is very important, of course. But I guess it's okay to go in the field without having the of course, geographical knowledge and the bit of theoretical knowledge is important, but one must at least go there in the field, and to begin with.
Yeah, I completely agree with the both of them, and I think I'd end my bit with this on a very positive note, actually, because yes, having said that, research is a very lonely experience. Research, PhD. Having said that, but the keynote address by Professor Pravina Shukla in the morning, the takeaway that for me from the presentation was that despite everything, despite the dichotomy about who are we representing and our biasness towards documenting certain data, so on and so forth, everything said and done, I think it's also about this surrendered understanding of the folk. It's a very nuanced, a very surrendered understanding and of the subject material. That's what entails. That's essentially what I think drives, personally speaking, as a fellow researcher myself, and with ethnography, with folklore studies, I think this is something where every day is a new experience. Every interaction, regardless of education, caste, class, gender, it's always a new learning experience. So certainly, I think on this positive note, I would end your question, Bhumika. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering my question. And I would like Selvaraj sir to finish since he only talked about Sangeeta.
I think we have some time left. So
Okay.
yeah.
Can we take up more questions?
Yeah,
We have
like
a few questions. A few people have
Okay.
raised their hands.
Okay. Somnath, you can ask your question now.
Yes,
Unmute.
good evening.
Two more are there. Somnath Pramanik and Sylvia Sagals.
Yes,
Okay.
good evening to everyone. My question to Sangeeta ma'am is that since you are associated with Indian classical music that you got to know from your introduction, and as far as I know that Indian classical music, the folk part is which is played at the end of any concert or at the end of playing any ragas. So would you like to add some other genres that can be put into a cluster of Indian classical music as a folk?
I would like to take example of because why I went into music, I wanted to learn the aspect of classical music and compare it to the very folk music that we listen, especially in North India. So there is this work that I'm doing with Sangeet Natak Academy, in which I'm taking up this utility pot, which is a folk pot, a utility pot. The potters don't make it to be the percussion in a musical tradition. It's just a utility pot. These percussionists from Ragini performance, they take up this pot and put it upside down and play it, as opposed to which we have a South Indian ghatam, which is played by percussionists, professional percussionists, and is also made by professional potters who make this ghatam just for music. So this is the example that I give in the context of your question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Somnath, for your question. I would like Sylvia, sir, to ask the question.
You can please unmute.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
My question is for Garima. Hi, Garima. That was a really interesting presentation. So I'm a folklore researcher myself. I'm doing a postdoc in Germany, and I specialize in folklore of Manipur. I'm from the Meitei community. My question is regarding your positionality, which I found very interesting, and I think that's a very good start to begin with. So you talked about the clarity about your position as a non-native, non-indigenous outsider who is researching on an indigenous community. So my question is, so as a researcher, what guidelines or ethics do you apply, or let's say, which are central to your methodology within your practices on the field? Because what we do here is we also deal with a lot of quote unquote data. We are trying to collect, document, which is a very important part of our research. So while we do so, what are your personal, methodological interventions or your cautions that you apply so as to steer clear of, say, expropriation, for the lack of a better word, to steer clear of expropriation of, because what we're dealing with here, these are minority communities, these are extremely marginalized. We are talking about indigenous epistemology, and also extremely esoteric. So as an outsider, how do you sort of, I would like to know a little bit more about your methodology on the field. I hope that the question is clear to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. I think that is a very pertinent and important question, because I think ethics is something that we sort of take as a last kind of, an option, as opposed to something that should be the first or primary concern. So my, because I'm yet to do my field work formally as a PhD student, but I did sort of a pre-PhD field work with the community. And during that time, the kind of personal, approaches that I did was that I first, worked with I'll say, I was mentored by the community scholars. And so what happened was that as they were going around doing documentation and archival research, I was asked to sit down with them and observe first, so that I could understand the kind of dynamic, understanding the community has with each other. And I think during those time, it made me realize the kind of approaches that is expected of me. And I realized that I remember in one of the places when we were, working, we were discussing, my mentor sort of gave me a few books and he said, please read them. And I read them and he said, never write like these. And I realized that the kind of ethnography that was being done which was being circulated, the example that I gave, was the way I was not supposed to approach. And And when I was, working with them for the half of the year when I was with them, it was just me observing, not trying to enter into the dialogues and conversation because I was still learning, not just the kind of, culture and traditions they have, but also the language, because it's within the language that a lot of, a communal identity is carried forward and archival identity is carried forward. So what I'm doing right now is that just because I'm in US doing PhD does not mean I sever connection with the mentors back. So there is this constant dialogue happening between what I'm learning here within academia as opposed to what within the field I'm expected to do in terms which are set down by the community. Because when I am in the field, I'm not coming really as an individual who is there to research. I'm going there as a collaborator who gets to be part of the space which is already so marginalized. And I know I don't have a very specific answer because I'm yet to do, as I said, a formal research, but I am hoping that when I'm there with all, with the training that has been done, but also the kind of experiences, the kind of relationships that I've created with the community, I will get to, explore more, discover more about what kind of ethical questions come in as a person who is an outsider from the community gets to be part of that, that space, gets to take space, because taking space in itself is sort of, trying to be in that, what I'm just trying to say is that within a year when I will be back in India doing field work with all my guidelines, with all my experiences, and with the kind of interpersonal relationships that I've created, I feel that would help me even better to understand my positionality, because I think this is a process that you learn throughout life. It's not something that, you learn within a year or two and then you're like, oh, this is the perfect answer. I think this is something that I will be learning throughout. I will be correcting myself. I will be understanding, okay, this is not what was supposed to be expected of me, or this is I should be following. So I'm hopeful that this lifelong learning will help me become even a better, more sensitive researcher who is an outsider. So I don't know if I answered it correctly or not, but I can say that I'm trying to become more, aware of my positionality as I go forward with my research and my ethnography.
Thank you, Garima. Thank you so much. Thank you for your sensitivity, and I wish you the very best with your research.
Now I think we're running ahead of time, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Selvaraj, so do you have any last words for the session since you're
Any more question?
Like Kashish has a question, but can you just briefly summarize that, Kashish? And like we can
Yeah,
spare
I'm
2
so
more
sorry.
minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. So my quest. So firstly, to keep it very short and precise, I really enjoyed the whole session. It's like a general comment to all the three panelists. It was a very intriguing session, and so I'm a final year undergrad student, and I am doing as part of my dissertation. It's something related to the Punjabi folklore as such. So again, what my question had two bits. One was relating to the ethical consideration bit, but I think it kind of got answered. So thank you for that. Secondly, so I'm dealing with four major narratives within Punjabi folktales as such, Punjabi folklore as such. So I am somehow facing issues in terms of like the translations, already existing translations that are out there, and okay, it's like a personal issue because I can't really understand and read and write in Punjabi. That's like a thing, but anyway, so the kind of existing translations that I come across, it heavily is biased in terms of the interpretation of the people who are translating those. So in case I'm able to translate folktales in the upcoming future research that I come across, how do I avoid that kind of personal bias in terms of the interpretation, not just for my own research, but say in case if I put forward the translations or the interpretation for further studies for other people to look into, how do I avoid that kind of personal bias? I hope I don't confuse you people more with my question.
So I think Kashish, this is something regarding. I do not think that you should be looking at this as as a shortcoming. Rather, this actually is space for you to grow as a researcher over here, because the more interpretation, the more in terms of translation, the more I guess the more data you come across, I think the richer your research work would be. Because personally speaking, I mean, while I was looking for that particular folk epic tradition, Khambathoibi, so there were multiple narratives available on the Khambathoibi epic tradition, and I was and I was so wrong. And I happily admit it, because where I had this preconceived notion about how I see this epic tradition as something that will be seen as appropriation model, or the idea of incorporating the mainstream into the local, into the indigenous tradition. But I was so heavily wrong. I was so totally wrong, because the more I saw the narrative, the more I saw the existing translation works, existing adaptation as far as the folk epic is concerned. There's a lot of scholarship that can be availed, that can be done around that subject. So I don't think you should be seeing this as a limitation or as a shortcoming, but you should embrace it. In fact, all the more reason for you to push it further, and then work on it and explore all these differences and intricacies as far as the translations are concerned. So that will be my bit, Kashish.
Thank you, Dr. Hemchandra. Bhumika. So I just want to add one line. Like I think before we start this field work thing and all this research work, we have some confusion about text. Like we cannot position ourselves to examine what is biased, and like that is a problem we almost everyone face with that with the process. But that is a pertinent question also. Like in terms of inclusivity and representation, how that is a translator is getting positioned in the dynamics, that is also a concern, and that is there, and that will be there also. But after like field work, I think we get some sense to navigate through that. So yeah, Bhumika, please carry on. Thank you.
Yeah. I would ask finally, like Selvaraj sir, to share a few thoughts before I conclude, and we can move on to the next session. So please.
Yes, we had a wonderful question session, and this is I will conclude with these small remarks. We had 3 presentations. One is done by Sangeeta, Jawla, and Dr. Hemchandra and Garima, Plawat. And I found their presentation, technically, like in the discipline wise. Although we had, we are in a different discipline, where we are looking from our discipline, folklore from our discipline. Like, we had a different methodology, but whereas the folklore, it has the people-centered approach. So that's what the field work is much important to, to cope up with this discipline as a folklore. So first presentation on material culture and oral folk narratives. So with these ideas, we had, seen in this Sangeeta's presentation, and Hemchandra's, work. I really found because it is new to me, and I heard about many of my friends from Manipur. We were having a discussion on Meitei communities and their works and all. And this is a kind of constructing identity from folk narratives, where we don't have identity identity, and we can construct the folklore is having the space to create, and we can see the identical issues from we can make the from folklore folk narratives. It means oral traditions. The third one purely methodological. She has raised and methodological questions in qualitative research, right? So it a kind of when we have how to approach the data from the data, and how we are going to locate our data into according our interest and the subject discipline wise. So as the nature of folklore methodology, it is it's relied on people-centered approach. And although we are in a different discipline background, we should keep our our idea that field work as well as and how we are going to use that ethnography data, and that ethnography data may be a like as Walter J. Wong orality and literacy, and logo and phono. He has portrayed that word logo and phono, and how orality and the oral literature or oral tradition has much more viable role rather than the literature, which means the written. And now we can raise a question: when it is written, the oral tradition, when it is written, it have is it having any viability of orality? So many questions are there. It is orality when, although it is written in for the literature society, but the soul is oral tradition, and it has the nature of orality in nature. And keeping in that mind, we can, as our young folklorists all over the world, and now it is the time to keep the folklore, our oral tradition, through our discipline. We can move further with our this discipline methodological or methods view. So keep all the discipline live with folklore. And I thank this international forum for giving me this opportunity to chair this event. And my friend Intaj Ali, I especially thank my friend Intaj Ali to given this opportunity. And I had an opportunity to see and hear many of throughout the pan-Indian session. Like I'm very much interested also, particularly in Northeast. So I had a wonderful session also, and as like you, thank you for this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your warm words. And now I would finally give the vote of thanks. Thanks to all the panelists for agreeing for this lovely session and for sharing your personal views and not withholding anything and sharing it with the absolute transparency. Thanks to Selvaraj sir for all his reflections as well. And I hope this is just a start. We will again get to meet and talk because, and I'm so glad that panelists have shared their email IDs with us. You guys can write to them with your thoughts, with their suggestions and ideas that you want to bounce upon them. And thank you so much. This was a lovely session. Even though we had a tiring day, I don't think people are tired. We are still willing to listen more and more. And as we go forward with the rest of the sessions, I hope we keep on participating. Thank you to all the panelists and to sir as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. So I would just check few technical things. Please